In this video, we're going to use sheets to make graphs of our wheel lab data. So here I've got some sample wheel lab data, and if we wanted to make a position time graph, there's no more processing of this data that needs to be done. One thing that makes it easier to graph things in sheets is if you arrange your data in a certain way before you make your graph. So what I'm going to do is I've got a clock reading here, position for two different data sets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clock readings and I'm going to repeat them down here underneath. I'm just going to copy and paste that. And then I'm going to take the high position data and I'm going to move it down to that spot so you can kind of see what that looks like. I can get rid of this now. So I've arranged my data like so, and then I'm just going to highlight all of this data in the data table, and I'm going to insert a chart. And it's going to put out a chart that's not really looking like what I want it to look like. So in the setup for the chart type, in this class, we're almost always going to use scatter charts. Well, that's pretty good already. And then the things you want to make sure on the x-axis, you want to make sure that your column for the x-axis is selected. Right? And then on the y-axis, you're going to have your two different series. So I've got the position low and the position high on the y-axis. And that's about all I need on the setup menu. If I click Customize, then I can change titles and things. So the chart title, I want this to be position versus time. And then on my horizontal axis, I'm going to put the clock reading in seconds. Now my vertical axis, I'm going to put position, did I spell that right? In centimeters. And now the graph's looking pretty good. And we just want to make sure that we put the curve fits on there. So I'm going to click on this little arrow by series, and I'm going to click trend line. And it puts a line on there, which is really not what we want for this graph. So for the type, I'm going to choose power series. That works great. And then just make sure for the label, you hit use equation, and that will put the equations up here by the graph. Then I can close this. And there's my position time graph. The cool thing is now you can cut and paste this easily into a Google document if you wanted to do your lab reports in the future. All right, moving on. We had to linearize, so getting used to using sheets. We had to linearize this data. So with this data here, if you look at the graph, right, this is an upwards opening parabola. And as you can see, when the clock readings get bigger by the same amount, the positions get bigger by increasing amounts. And one way to possibly fix that is to square the clock readings and make a graph of position versus the square of the clock reading. So I'm going to do that with a calculated column for clock readings squared. Let me just stretch this out a little bit so we have room. So I can do that out here. That's going to be in seconds squared. If anybody knows a great way to make things look superscripted or subscripted in sheets, please share that with me because I don't. All right, now what we're going to do. The clock reading squared is simply this number squared. So if I type equals to tell sheets that I want to perform some kind of calculation on another cell, then I want to take equals, and then I want to take this cell, and I want to square it, so that's caret 2. Or you can hit, A2 times A2 will work as well. 0 looks great. It's going to suggest autofill. I'm just going to go ahead and check OK because that looks great. And now I've got my clock reading squared. And so now I want to put this on my x-axis and this on my y-axis, so we're going to make this data look like this again. So I'm going to take my clock reading squared, copy it, put it right here. And then you get this mess where these are broken references. It doesn't know what you're referring to because it's referring to something 1, 2, 3 columns to the left, but there are no columns to the left. For example, let's see. Yeah, 3 columns to the left of here are empty columns, so it's just squaring 0. So the way to fix that is instead of hitting Command V to paste it, I'm going to undo that, then you're going to, wherever I want that data to go, I'm going to go to the Edit menu and hit Paste Special, paste the values only. And that gives me the values that I need. Right. See if we can. I'm going to text wrap that just so it doesn't take up so much space. And now we're going to put these positions where they belong. These positions. Remember, we're going to cut and paste these so that they fit down here, which means I'm going to need a little bit more. Go up to. All right, so it looks like this. Again, we're just trying to get it into a format like this because this makes it super easy to make your graphs look the way that you want them to. Highlight the data that I want to graph, insert the chart. Again, it gives me the chart that I don't want, so pick the scatter chart. That's kind of straight. We'll pick the scatter chart, and it looks like it's picked the right thing. We want clock reading squared on the x-axis, low and high positions is my series. Customize, we can change our titles. Jeez. Oh no, I didn't do that in the wrong place. Yes, I did. Why didn't you guys tell me that? All right, we'll just get rid of that then. That goes in the chart title. There we go. Then we will go horizontal axis title. I'm just going to edit that one. Squared, 7 squared. And my vertical axis title. Position. There we go. And then, sorry, in the series, we'll put a trend line. This time we do want a line. For our label, we want use equation. You see that we've got a tiny little y-intercept there, but remember, we're saying, hey, if our positions go up to 125 or so and our y-intercept is 4-ish, then that's within that 5% rule where if it makes sense to do so in the experiment, we can just call that y-intercept 0. And that's our graph of position versus clock reading squared. Finally, I made another copy of the data. If we wanted to do velocity versus time, then we've got a lot more stuff to do. So I'm going to take this whole set of data and kind of scooch it somewhere. Maybe there. Sure. Actually, let's undo that. Let's put it down here for now. I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so let's work with this data that we have right here. To make a velocity versus time graph, remember it's about slopes of connecting lines. And so we're basically going to find the slope of every connecting line between every two data points on every successive pair of data points on this graph. So from 0 to 1, connect them. From 1 to 2, slope of the connecting line. Slope of the line from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, and so on. So to do that, we'll make some calculated columns for displacement. Time interval. And from displacement and time interval, we can calculate the average velocity. Might as well turn the wrap on again. Text wrapping, wrap. And then this weird column called middle time. I don't know if you guys remember this from freshman year. All right, so how do we calculate these things? The displacement. For this first space, we're not going to have any displacement because it's the first clock reading. But from 0 to 1, my displacement is just equal to this position minus this position. If I hit enter, it gives me an answer there, and it suggests that I autofill the rest. So you can autofill the rest. Hey, if it doesn't give you an autofill option, then like let's say we change this to, we'll do that incorrectly. Say we change it to B3 times B2. Okay. Then if I wanted to fill it, you can grab this little dot right there. And that will fill down for you. Okay. Of course that's wrong, so I'm going to back up a few steps. Okay, that looks right again. Time interval will calculate the same way. So I'm just going to say it's equal to this column, or that cell, sorry, minus that cell. And if you don't get a time interval 1 for the whole thing, then you're doing something wrong. And then finally for the average velocity, that's going to be the displacement divided by the time interval. Suggested autofill, awesome. Okay. And middle time, back in the Logger Pro days, you had to do all kinds of weird convolutions to find the middle time. But the middle time is really just the average of the clock readings, right? So the middle time between 0 and 1 is the average of 1. So if I just say equals, you can do this several different ways. One way is say equals, put that in parentheses, this cell plus this cell, and divide by 2. That gives you the average, right? Another way you could do it is by using the average function. And then highlighting the range. That might be the most overpowered use of the function ever, right? So whichever way you want to do it is fine. I'm just trying to give you that average option just in case in case you want to take a average of 3 cells or something. It's a lot of typing when you get to 3, 4, 5 sets of data that you're trying to average, but with just 2 it's pretty easy to add and divide by 2. And there's our column. So we've got middle time and we've got average velocity. These are the ones that we want. And again, all we want to do is if we want to get, we need to get 2 sets of data, right? So let's go ahead and make ourselves another set of data. If I just copy this over, drink. Okay. So this is going to be my second data set, so I'm just going to get rid of all this. Then I'm going to paste this in there. Does that look right? No, it looks terrible. Let's see if we can do this. We'll fix that. There we go. We don't need any of this stuff down here because there is no data. Okay. And I think we're good. Just make sure that looks like displacement, that looks like time interval, that looks like dividing the 2, and that looks like, yeah. So that's great. Okay, so now, again, we just want to kind of rearrange our data into a format that's easy to graph. There's clock reading in the low position. Here's our high position. You're probably wondering why I'm making a position versus clock reading graph again when I'm trying to make a velocity versus time graph. So here's our middle times. Let's say this is our level. This is our high. Here's our broken references again, because that's not what we wanted to do. Click here, paste special, paste the values, and there we go. Middle times are there, wonderful. Paste values. Wow, just wow, people. Sorry, it's been a long day. There we go. So there's our low data, and now we want to put our high. Phase values, dink. And then, pretty sure you could do this just by highlighting this and hitting graph, and it would work just fine. The reason I keep scooching this stuff down the way I do is because eventually, not today, maybe not tomorrow, you'll get data where your independent variable values are not exactly the same as your dependent, are not exactly the same for both sets of data. And when that happens, then formatting your data in this way is really kind of the easiest way to get your graphs to look right, or the easiest way to tell the graph what data you want to work in a way that the graph will just like more automatically create the chart that you want. I am trying to just make this look better. Okay. So again, now we can take these 3 columns and we can insert our chart. And one more time, we want a scatter chart. Middle time on the x-axis, low and high velocities is our series. Customize, titles, chart title, velocity versus time, for wheel. Horizontal title is just time. Clock reading, rating. And our vertical axis title is velocity. Okay, for people who are wondering why I don't call it average velocity middle time, it's because, remember, the average velocity over a time interval is the same as the instantaneous velocity in the middle of that time interval, if the acceleration is constant. And we don't know if the acceleration is constant or not, but we're just going to assume it is, just because the middle is probably a better place to graph that velocity than the beginning and the end of the time interval, even if the acceleration is not constant. All right, I'm kind of looking at this graph and I'm saying, hey, how come this goes 2 to 4 and then it doesn't quite make it to 0 over there, right? So we can fix that by going here to our horizontal axis and making the minimum value equal 0 there. And that puts that back in there. You could do the same thing with the vertical axis if you were missing that there for a future graph. And then in the series box, we want to make sure that we put our trend line. This actually is a line. Linear is fine. Label, use equation. And there's our graphs for our wheel lab.